other platforms. This one I close, this one I close as well. Now let me open this window, and then delete this one. To delete this recording, don't need it. Right. And maybe I should copy the questions. Yeah. Let me open this one. I forgot to mute the second laptop. Yeah. Muted now. So what about questions for today? Nope. We need these ones. I think I'll just leave the window open. So, I think we can officially begin. All the platforms are active. Yep. Maybe the last thing I want to do is to decrease the quality on other platforms, just not to overwhelm the network. YouTube notification done. All right, so what's happening here? I'm gonna press the recording button. Hello and welcome everyone. Here is Andy. Here is our bonfire. Today my web camera is much bigger and there is no game here because today is an educational stream. Today we are talking about different questions about studying English, other languages, about the philosophy of teaching, psychology of teaching, some cases from my practice, some interesting precedents, and all the other stuff connected to the aforementioned questions. So, aforementioned questions. I butchered the word badly. I made the same episode, a similar episode in Russian just several days ago. On my YouTube channel, you can find the recording. And as I promised, I'm going to do the same, doing the same in English now. The topics I'm gonna bring to your attention just a couple of minutes later, but let me just say what you should expect. So I'll be presenting the topics one by one, giving my opinions, sharing my thoughts, providing some examples, and depending on how many questions I get throughout the stream, the recording will be longer or shorter. That is, if we don't have anyone, for example, if people are just going to listen to me silently, then I'll just express all my opinions and wrap up. But honestly, of course, I'm hoping for some interaction with the viewers. So do let me know if you join, when you join, what your thoughts on my opinions are, and so on and so forth. The stream that we made in Russian took us 2 hours and 53 minutes, but that was my stream. That was a birthday stream as well, and it was the very first stream about such a topic, and also it was in Russian, so I kind of felt a bit awkward at times. I don't think it's that much visible in the recording, but yeah, so it was more difficult for me. It was challenging to keep all my thoughts together and follow the strict logic, which is expected to happen during the first episodes, including this one. So I'm just calibrating. I'm trying to understand how best to structure this format, how long episodes should be, in what manner topics should be presented, and so on and so forth. So kinda, as we say, the first crepe, the first pancake must always be a failure. That's a proverb from Russian, but maybe there is something close to it in English. I think there is something. Actually, let me immediately check that because I'm quite curious about that. Let's see. The first step is always the hardest. Well, that's something not like proverbish, it's rather common sense. The first fry is bound to be a flop. Interesting. I wonder how common this one is. The first pancake is always lumpy. The first pancake is always a mess, is always botched. I think it's translation from Russian. It's not exactly, I think, what English-speaking people say, but correct me if I'm wrong, if you're a native speaker. A rocky start, well, that's something I have heard. Not as specific, maybe, but definitely delivers the message. Like the start is always kind of not very successful. Now, what's happening here? My video is frozen on one of my platforms, but that's not a big problem. Alrighty, then questions. Let's get to the questions part. So I thought that it would be better if I translated them and put them onto YouTube chat as we talk. I mean, as I present the whole event for today. And I'm gonna copy the order that I had during my Russian stream, just to kind of follow the same logic. I re-listened to it today, and I have fresh memories, and that will help me to go by the same order. So the first question I discussed during that stream was how I see the culture, of language education in general. That's number one. I'm gonna put the digit. Then question number two was how often you should study languages. Then the third one, let it be how to determine your language level, and should you even do that? Somebody, I'm quite silly. I just hear the notifications, and I thought somebody was writing, but that was me. Then question number 4. Why? It's a question that is massively linked with the native tongue of Russian speakers. The question is why the native language is usually... Actually, no, that was the second part of the question. The biggest part, I think, was the bigger part at least, was why there are so many fears about languages, while I'm quoting the question that I was asked, while other spheres other spheres of life aren't affected that much. Meaning, for example, sport, cooking, style, etc. And let me see why some people don't have this fear, and why we often ignore our native tongue, and at the same time are obsessed with speaking English flawlessly. English flawlessly, like Shakespeare. Shakespeare. That's number 4. Hey, I exceeded the number of symbols. I see, so I should cut a portion of question number 4. Then let it be question number 5, why we often ignore our native tongue. And question number 6 is gonna be, can you teach English without a student's book? And yeah, that's gonna be a question. So of course there is another one, which is it was just placed as a question in my Russian stream, and that was how some kind of interesting cases from my professional experience, but it kind of goes without saying that I'll be using those anyway. So here is our agenda for today, and I should begin with how I see the culture of language education in general. Why this question is important? Well, one of my students who is senior DevOps, or maybe he's even higher in his career already, so he's an extremely interesting person, very educated, very curious about many things, striving to get various knowledge about different spheres of life. And so once he said that if he were to go to university again, or if he were to design a curriculum, the first subject would be how to study. And that was like a subject about how to approach your educational targets, how to do tasks, how to do research, and so on and so forth. Why is this important again? Well, what I'm going to tell is, of course, linked to my personal experience, or rather, experience of millions of people from my country, and I suspect not only, that we study for years and years on end, 10 years normally in our Russian educational system, and people can study English for maybe not full 10 years, but 7, 6, sometimes with university. Some people actually can study for 15 years in total, and in the end, the outcome is, well, to say the least, miserable, because they barely get to a stable standard elementary level. So they get some kind of scattered knowledge about present simple and maybe some continuous tenses, maybe past simple. Yeah, they drill past forms of verbs. So the present form, the past form, and the past participle. And of course, some vocabulary, but that's it. They cannot speak, they cannot write, they barely can read, and of course, they have a phobia of listening to English speech because they understand literally nothing. And so the question is, how does it happen that in a educational system that has been in operation for decades, how is that possible that people spend another decade studying something, studying a subject, and end up with, well, close to nothing, end up with something that technically should be achieved in less than maybe half a year or maybe a couple of months of hard work. So we could say that, well, millions of people, I mean, hypothetically speaking, millions of people might not care too much about English. And so that's why they massively ignore it, especially being teenagers, and the same way they ignore other subjects. But the same thing happens at university, where people are elder, and it feels like I think other subjects achieve better results, and I'm kind of far from saying that students get a good grasp of chemistry, for example, or physics or some other high precision sciences, but I still think, especially if a school is decent, most people have some at least basic or average knowledge in the end, especially of their own language, especially of literature, especially of mathematics. So and it's not only about students, so probably teachers are doing something incorrect. It couldn't be just lack of enthusiasm from the students. Probably there is some mistake in methodology from teachers who work in those institutions. And so this whole question about why, about what the educational culture must be, is actually a painful one, because the reality is that we have a non-functional system that fails year after year to bring any value to those who are studying in schools, in universities. And it's a very global question. It's huge. Most of the questions I'm going to be talking about today are really huge, and I'm just setting the outlines for future conversations. But maybe I can hint at what I mean by culture. So, first of all, I guess it's over focus on grammar. I think we focus too much on this, and it happens because it's very easy to teach grammar, because it has understandable rules, it has a clear presentation, and it's very hard. It's very easy to measure. So, like today we studied, or this week we studied this topic. Next week another topic. We have exercises. We have homework. So it really fits well the educational system. But at the same time, in my opinion, grammar is probably the least important thing that should be taught, because essentially a language is not about grammar, it's about vocabulary. And to get vocabulary, you have to read, you have to listen, you have to talk, you have to consume the language, and you have to produce the language. Grammar, if you do everything right, will probably come itself. Because your brain will start to trace tendencies in the language. You will understand what is present simple. You will understand what is past simple after you have read some couple of hundred of pages of some adapted elementary English book, for example, Tom Sawyer, that I usually use to work with beginner students. Also, it's understanding the morphology of the language. A lot of my students, I discovered that not long ago, work very badly with analysis, with analyzing what kind of a part of speech they are dealing with. So is it a noun, is it an adjective, is it an adverb? And they randomly use them because they never thought about the roles of suffixes, the roles of roots, the roles of prefixes, and so on and so forth. So they will use safe, not safety, or safety, not safe. They will use professional as a noun when they want to say a profession, like this famous phrase, fashion is my professional, and they never think it's incorrect. I'm not even talking about prepositions. So prepositions and other little words really depend on how attentive the person is, really depend on whether the person, the student, the learner is aware of how much focus he or she must put into reading something or listening to something. Because the temptation is, and usually it's connected to their mother tongue, the temptation is to understand the semantic part of the sentence. So kind of look at the nouns, look at the verbs. So you see, for instance, so like, I listened to music, and the words that they see are I listened and music, and to is ignored because it's a small word. And for example, in Russian, we don't say listened to, we say I listened music. There is no preposition in Russian there. And they project what they know about the native language onto what they think they know in English. And my task, and I think the task of many other educators, is to explain how to actually analyze and concentrate on language, on the target language. Speaking of educators, that's still the same question, the same topic about the culture. As I mentioned previously, it's not only the students who are the problem, it's also the teachers. Because in my picture of the world, I think that, and it's, I think it's just common knowledge, people are born with predispositions, with talents. Some people are born and they really develop well in sports, they're physically more prone, agile, and so on and so forth. Some people are really well versed in humanitarian arts. Some people are inclined to do mathematics. Some people, well, paint very well with high precision from their early age. And of course, I'm not saying that if you're not born with some talent, it's like a hopeless case. No, a lot of people who master the skill, they say it's not about the talent, it's about practice, right? But still, we are kind of beginning at very different points sometimes. And if you observe children, you will see that they are, well, I work with adults, but I think we all have had our share of observing children, and we know that they are different and display different predilections, as I said, predispositions, inclinations, tendencies. I'm not playing a synonym game, but just trying to avoid repetition. So what that means is, again, the way I imagine it, teachers were born with this predisposition towards languages. We, those who have a knack for foreign languages, just somehow do the analysis well. We dissect, we organize, we rationalize the language, we intuitively understand where it is a noun, where it is a verb, why they say a thing this way and not the way that we are used to saying it in our mother tongue, so we just basically accept it. Maybe it has something to do with open-mindedness in general, like how ready you are to accept a new fact, new knowledge, a new point of view. So maybe it has something to do with some innate tolerance levels in all possible meanings of the word tolerance. But what we have is a social group of people who learned a language successfully, but do not actually realize why it was successful. So they think that they did it because of like a set of factors, but they are wrong. Like maybe they were doing a completely different sequence of actions, but say they went to a pedagogical university later, just linguistic university, and they were told some more official about some more official approaches, how education must be done, what to expect from a person, and so on and so forth. And they adopt this system and they try to impose it on their students, and they fail because where they started, the square one for a teacher, for a person with linguistic tendencies, is very different and often much higher than for a person who just begins to get acquainted with this world of English or world of some different language. And why I think so is, well, I always feel quite insecure about such things because I always, I'm afraid maybe I'm imagining something. Maybe it's not what other teachers have in their practice. Maybe I'm just doing something wrong. But what I have seen is when I try to put forward my kind of legacy expectations, like the way an educational program expects people to perform, I fail as a teacher. So people aren't able to catch up with expectations, and their real needs are very different from what the program thinks. And there are, well, dozens of examples. Maybe I can mention a couple. So the first one is present continuous is normally taught right after present simple. And often when I have a beginner student, like beginner who actually has had very little exposure to English or never truly was interested. So again, it could be a person who spent 10 years, no less, with language, but still couldn't care less, and you ask what is present continuous, and the person isn't able to answer. While you can imagine a school program, I mean, or a student's book expects people to answer this question after, well, what, 10 lessons, or maybe 20 lessons, so it doesn't happen. And so present continuous is a phenomenon that is very inherent in English, but say in Russian it's absent. We don't have present continuous in Russian. And so to explain what it is, I need the person to already switch to some kind of flexibility and language perception mode where he or she is tuned with English, where they have spent some time with reading or socializing or practicing. And that means that usually it's not month 2 or 3 or 4 of education. Usually it's later. And I'm talking about adults. So what I normally do, I start teaching them past simple, past forms of verbs, because My interest is to give them reading as soon as possible so that they can have a lot of exposure, because from there they will get some other questions. For example, present continuous, they'll be meeting those ing forms and they'll get interested, like, what am I actually seeing? What is that? Another example is the construction, I want you to do something. Again, in Russian, we don't say that, we say a completely different thing. And this construction, I want you to do something, is very natural. I myself, I think, learned it or understood it many, many years ago. Maybe I was a teenager in my 6th or 7th grade at school. And I was like, okay, so that's how English people say that. I'm going to just mimic and repeat and do the same. My adult students have been listening to me, some of them for years, and obviously they have been listening to other sources of English, they have been reading, and a lot of them don't use this construction because it's not what they're used to in Russian. In Russian, it's a different, again, it's a different expression. It's built in a different order, and they stick to this order until, and they have been doing that, had been doing it until recently. I was like, oh, wait a second, why are you doing that? So it was of course my error, and I've been in the industry for many years, and to my horror, I realized again I had been doing that all wrong. I missed that point, and to be honest, maybe my memory fails me, but I don't remember a single student's book that teaches I want you to do something as a construction. So, and there are, as I said, there are so many more examples of such like discrepancies between the expectations of or needs, necessities of a learner and the actual program that has its own logic and the tradition in the educational system. So I don't have answers here. I'm just saying that in my experience and in my world, there is something terribly wrong about how we approach the culture of educating people, and I'm trying to amend at least the way I'm approaching education. So this part went smoothly, albeit I haven't got any questions to respond to. So let's, I guess, move to question number 2, which is how often you should study languages. Here I want to say that there have been different approaches in my experience, in my career. I think the classical approach is twice a week. So we have a lesson on Monday and on Thursday, on Tuesday and on Friday, usually with a gap between, so that a student can have time to prepare. Over time, I realized that not all people can fit this system for one reason. When I switched to online education and became self-employed, I began to transform into a language coach, rather, not an English teacher, but a language coach. Because of the workload, how many people I had, and because of one factor that I'm going to talk about now. The factor was based on my own experience. So, for example, I went to an art school 3 years ago to study drawing, and I began with also twice a week schedule. Each session took 3 hours, and very quickly I realized, I think it was after the first month, that I didn't have enough time to practice drawing and painting between the sessions. And arriving at the next session the same week, I felt not only that I had not progressed, but actually that I had been degrading somehow, because my brain was just overwhelmed with the input and I could not respond to new material properly, and I also had forgotten what had been taught to me before. And I switched to go into the art school once a week. And in that system, I had much more time to practice and hone my skills and reflect on what I had been told. And there were many other observations of similar sort, and I began to shift most of my students towards meeting once a week. And the system was that when I had a new student, or with my existing student, we just spent a lot of time trying to understand what they actually need. I call this calibration. So I'm really digging deep into the person's legacy with the language. So some old problems, maybe some pains, some closures they never got, the expectations from future, the targets, the problems they faced, like short-term problems, long-term gaps in their knowledge. And this calibration process sometimes took months. After we finished this calibration process, we would together every lesson make a plan about the next lesson. So every student would express their opinion on what they think should be done. That could be some reading, some listening exercises, some grammar education, some just writing to be done. And before the next lesson approached, they would send me their homework, their results, and I would give my feedback, and before the lesson or during the lesson, and so that's how the system went. Let me just quickly have a look at, okay, just some blinking from the second computer. I was suspicious what was happening there. So that was the schema. And you see why I call this coaching, because it's not these classics where we together during the lesson read the rules or work with the book, do the listening tasks, do the reading tasks. That I've had a lot of this in my career before, but for me now it's impossible to imagine working like that, because my target now is to remove everything that should be done, remove everything that can be done independently by the learner. That has to be removed and placed outside the lesson. During the lesson, we only do things that require my attention, the coach's attention. So that is feedback providing, that's conversation, talking, asking questions, answering questions, and well, the most complicated issues with vocabulary and grammar. With time, it became obvious, and the time necessary to make things obvious actually was quite a lot. I only recently, again, just a month ago maybe, began to understand that the system of once a week meetings doesn't fit everyone, because the contact is somehow a bit lost. So when you meet people twice a week, sometimes it feels too much. When you meet once a week, it feels like you kind of lose connection, and you want more control. You see that the person actually has more issues than you can handle during one session. And especially with beginners, where there are, well, dozens of questions coming from all directions. But there are other factors that make the whole thing much more difficult. Um, Another reason why I asked people to meet once a week was they were very tired. I saw that they tried to, well, they all have jobs and they all have families and friends and their own hobbies and activities, and they come to my lesson and they look quite tired. And I just cannot find it in myself to push them, and I don't think I should actually. An adult person must make his or her own decisions about time distribution, about priorities. Occasionally, I was asked to be like a harsher teacher, like, can you push me? And I'm like, no, I cannot, because I'm not your parent. I cannot do that. You must decide yourself how much time you devote to English. And and yeah, I also don't see how I can be pushing a person who looks actually exhausted and say something like, well, you were supposed to do this task, we agreed about your homework, why isn't it done? And so once a week looked like a realistic one. Daisy Beans, hello, hello, no problem. I still only have covered 2 questions, well, 1.5 questions out of 6. So you can, you still have a lot of stories to hear. Now I'm talking now I'm talking about the troubles between choosing between the systems. Let me say it again. I'm now talking about whether we should meet once per week or twice per week with a student, and why it's hard to make a choice. Factor number 1 is that I'm a coach rather not a teacher. I give plans and tasks and expect them to be done, and very often people don't have time for that if they have meetings twice a week. Another problem is that people are very busy and tired, and when they have meetings twice a week, they, well, look even more exhausted, and I feel really terrible about pushing them to study, and I don't want to do that because it's their own choice to prioritize, and they usually, of course, prioritize jobs and their family, and when they ask me to be harsher, I refuse because I don't have it in myself to decide for them, and I don't think I should. This is the teacher like pep talk I needed to slap myself into revision. Well, I'm not going to slap anyone. So if you, and I don't think slapping is actually a good methodology, not a good method again. And yeah, there was a thought I wanted to express here about how often we should meet. So it's and as I said, sometimes once is not enough and 2 is too much, and I'm actually kind of a bit lost here how to deal with that. I'm in search. Of course, there is also a question about whether people actually need English and whether they actually should study. That comes when homework is systematically not done, and when people start asking me to be more assertive, and I usually return a different question. I say, well, are you sure you actually need English? Maybe you've come to a wrong teacher, maybe you've chosen a wrong hobby, maybe it's not what you want in life. So maybe you should think whether you need all this education at all. And yeah. And well, I didn't talk about that during my Russian stream actually, because the question is how often, and maybe it has to be split into different questions, like how often should you meet your teacher? And basically my conversation, my speech was about that. How often should you study? Mm, well, the answer is probably always, because and it depends on what you consider education, because I work with English every day and I practice it every day. I'm practicing it now because I'm streaming in English and I've been listening to lots of English podcasts. And I mean, I listen to them every week, almost every day, streams, podcasts, audiobooks. So maybe the question is even wrong. How often should I study? As much as possible, because many teachers studied for years to get to their level. And we know already from question number one that teachers have a predisposition towards languages, so they are faster. And that means that a student will probably have to spend even more time, at least at the beginning, to become as efficient in education. Yes, people should study. Well, Matt Knox writes, now that's something I can get behind. Could you specify what exact idea that was? And welcome to the stream also. I have covered, I'm not sure for how long you've been listening, but I've covered so far 2 questions, and actually now, and it's interesting. I mean, this experimental format, I just understood that the question, how often you should study languages, I have been talking about how often you should meet your teacher and not how often you should study. And that is funny because I was answering a completely different question. This one requires a totally different answer, in fact. So, should we move on to question number 3? How to determine your language level, or we have some other questions at this point? Submerging yourself in English with stream, movies, games, and all that in English. Yeah, it depends on the type of student you are. Daisy Beans, if you specify maybe what depends on the type, because it's just like I'm trying to merge what you both have said now, or at least what I think you said. So before you can submerge yourself in English with streams, with movies and games, it's just one of the biggest pains that people come with. They say, I don't understand what they say in movies. I cannot read because it's too difficult. I cannot watch the news because they're too hard, and because it is too hard, sorry, the news. And so basically when a person faces English, there is a collapse of confidence, there is a collapse of understanding. And they say, what's wrong? What am I doing wrong? And the answer is, well, everything. Everything. And the question is, well, why should you understand? Your vocabulary bank is small. You don't remember, or you never knew grammar, and you don't know how to approach parts of speech. You don't understand the syntax, and so on and so forth. So I usually say, well, from the point where, if we have, let's say, beginner elementary student, from the point where we are now until you can start to watch streams or listen to audiobooks and everything else, we have like 2 years, maybe a bit more, maybe a bit less. Depends on your speed, depends on your devotion, but not 2 months, not half a year. No. So people are massively unrealistic about such things. And also they, let me see what Daisy Beans wrote. Okay, so it's cool. There was a point I was learning 2 languages at once, French and Spanish. I'm a student who likes a teacher with a lot of energy and knows how to engage with students. So that's, I think it's a different question. It's about well, how teachers can make students enthusiastic, or if they cannot. I'm talking about what is expected from a learner to get better with languages. So there is still a set of expectations that has to be met, because if it is not met, a person will never get past elementary or even beginner level. Well, okay, maybe can get to elementary, but further steps require a shift in the attitude towards the languages, towards English, for example, that you need to start reading and analyzing and sorting out, like, what is the subject of the sentence, what is the action, and learn words and find ways that are most effective for you. And so it's just, it's a long way. It's a long way. Learners need to be consistent with the work they are given. You see, Daisy Beans, the problem with this statement that you have, like, need to be consistent, I mean, I think they are given. It's, I mean, I agree. I agree. It's just, this consistency is just determined by many factors, and it's also about the teacher, as you rightly said. Like, can he or she support the enthusiasm? Can tasks be tailored to what their interests are, and so on and so forth? So yeah, I'm just trying not to lose the thread of conversation, because we're kind of, now we shot at several topics at the same time, like atmosphere in the classroom and inspiring learners and the expectations from learners. But I mean, okay, let's get back. So I was talking about how often you should study, how often you should go to classes, and maybe how often a person should do language work. Maybe it has to be a topic for another stream. In fact, maybe I should write it down. How often should we actually learn? Yeah, I'm very I'm slightly embarrassed now, because yeah, it's funny how I realized that I was answering a totally different question. So I remember doing Shakespeare at schools. It felt like a different dimension. Do I keep bringing in a new conversation? No, I mean, sometimes maybe yes, but that's exact. I mean, that's nice, because I'm just well, before you came, before Metnox came, I had been talking to myself for an hour, and it's hard, because I mean, it was successful, I think, but at the same time, I'm kind of on the other hand, I'm not getting what people are thinking about. On the other hand, I have my own direction, and so with questions, it's much easier to build a conversation, because I can be responding. But at the same time, we have an agenda, so I'll be continuing to stick to the agenda, because I have four questions to cover left. At the same time, I do need some questions from you and some commentaries, of course, to add something. Maybe I miss some points that I should cover. And of course, certain questions can be taken for future discussions, which I will massively appreciate. So, Metnox has been here for like 40 minutes, silently watching from the shadows. All right, so that's good to know. That's good to know, because I always feel, now I feel kind of awkward talking to myself. Always have, actually, but just now it's it's more often than not that I have somebody to talk to, and when there is no one, I'm kind of like, okay, am I even making sense to anyone? All right, I'll answer accordingly then, so we don't keep going off topic. I mean, worry not. I was just, again, this just moment when you both came, and I was like, finally, I can just ask for feedback and have somebody else to interact with, and I got off the track, but I'll now be back, and I think we'll be okay. So just share your thoughts. All you have, will decide whether to discuss them right now or put them into the bank of ideas and tackle them later. So just don't be discouraged. So please do share your thoughts. Now, how to determine your language level, and should you even do that, is a question I really like talking about, because levels have been such a pain in the neck. The whole system with levels is a mystery to me, because yeah, we have this CEFR rating from A0 to C2, so A0, A1, A2, B1, B2, C1, C2, from beginner to proficient. And so I already told you how complicated the educational system it is, and that it's not always working the way it's intended, where people just fit the expectations, like, okay, today we study present simple, and everyone happily studies present simple. Next month it is present continuous, and then we get to the next topic and the next topic. So in my professional practice, again, maybe I'm doing something wrong, maybe I'm a strange teacher, and I have and all my career has been a lie, but what I can say is maybe only 5 or 10% of my learners were able to fit the expectations corridor, where you actually have people who grow according to these levels and develop their skills with the same pace, and well, mostly I have a very zigzag situation, so where people are, well, where they excel at some point, and then with another area of the language they just fail gloriously and have a huge gap that has to be filled. And I have lots of students who are advanced C1 students, and they have very big problems with present simple. I mean, they can talk to you about philosophy, they can talk to you about science, about IT, and I mean, they actually can use most of tenses, the tenses that exist. They efficiently use conditionals. They have very complex vocabulary, like C1, C2 vocabulary. They read books in English. They watch series in English, but they will say he, do, and they will ask questions like, are you agree, and so on and so forth. So they will botch present simple rules. Occasionally they will say something like, I didn't work yesterday, so they will also be mistaken with past simple sentences. And so they will have these slips. And I mean, it's a light case, because I think any examinator will just say like, okay, these are little mistakes. Of course, the person is displaying a high-level English skill. Is that system that you use the same all over the world? If you mean from A0 to C2, yeah, I think it's the most popular system to assess language levels. The language level in English. I mean, it's an English system, because I think Chinese has HSK with 6 levels, if I'm mistaken, and German I don't remember, probably as the similar one to English, but I'm not sure. So I can only tell you about English, and that is official. So from A0 to C2, from beginner to proficient. More fun happens when people when lack of confidence, lack of experience come to play, and a person walks into the classroom for a language interview and says, well, I'm a beginner. You start talking to this person, and turns out that it's an intermediate student or upper intermediate student, because the person can effectively use English, reads in English, watches cartoons in English, and says he is a beginner. I'm saying he because it was a man. So he says he's a beginner because he is trying to be modest, and because he is ashamed, because he is very self-demanding, and he cannot forgive himself for some bloopers in his speech, and so he's like, well, I'm a complete beginner. Well, a complete beginner doesn't know like 50 words in English, despite the fact that they surround him or her in their life, like shampoos and brands and so on and so forth. The person doesn't see even that. That's a complete beginner. Moet Knox, of course, it is totally. I mean, yeah, it's a nice joke, which I have seen many, many times. Well, the British do the same thing. Will love butchering our language. Well, I don't think so. Daisy Beans. I mean, when I think you're talking about a different set of mistakes. So what happens in what I have seen in commentaries on YouTube and so on and so forth, it's like you can ignore apostrophe, like you say, you write it's without this apostrophe, but it's supposed to be there, for example, because it is, or the word there. Well, like they are spelled with an apostrophe transforms into there, which is the opposite of here, or there like belongs to somebody, and there are lots of such mistakes. And also, I know that it's a rhetorical like method in cinematography, in games, where people start speaking like, for example, we was there, or we does this. So I've seen that when English screenwriters try to show a village dweller, so a person who hasn't had enough education about English, and the word ain't, I know, is used in a similar way. So I mean, the mistakes I see from natives are different from mistakes I see from learners. Of course, you know better. This means you live in the UK, but I suspect you're talking about some different mistakes. Like it's understandable. We in Russian also have a lot of bloopers with our native language, but they're different from the mistakes that people who try to learn Russian make. And it's actually a great sign when a person starts making mistakes that are kind of pertinent to natives, and that's funny. So it also defines your level, what kind of mistakes you're making in English or in Russian. So back to the point, in my opinion, a language level is about how well you can perform in a language, and not about your grammar. And very often, at least for Russian, for schools in Russia that teach English, it's all about grammar, like what kind of grammar rules you know, how well you can operate them, and that defines your language skill. And also we have this problem with so let's imagine a person who is very fluent, can speak easily with people, but makes a lot of mistakes. Like the vocabulary is great, a lot of terminology from different fields, but so I have a student, for example, who when he came to me had a lot of problems with grammar. So present simple was under very bad control, and past simple was almost non-existent, was replaced by present simple, and present perfect was plainly non-existent together with other more complex tenses. But the person already at that time was able to talk about cryptocurrency, about economics, about world politics, about IT, about, well, many things, in fact. And so if his employer were to ask me what is his level, well, I would say, I don't know. I mean, of course, I cannot say like the person is elementary, because I've seen elementary people who cannot talk, and I know a lot of people who cannot talk about such topics in their native tongue, in their native language. They just don't have information, or they are not just good conversationalists per se. Like they aren't very able to have a conversation. Their soft skills are not developed. And so he's not elementary. And at the same time, of course, I cannot say that he's intermediate, because well, he cannot effectively convey his point, because he struggles with words, he struggles badly with grammar, and the language level here is undeterminable. Basically, it's like I have no idea what to say. I can say that if we work with this person for some months, we will have great results, I think. So, like, the question should be, should I hire him? The answer is totally. Like, I think this is, and now I see, after we have worked for 2 years, his language capacity, his pace of learning are really decent, and so for me it's rather a question. Not the question should be not what is the level now, but what is the person capable of reaching in 2-3 months, maybe half a year. Let me see the chat. Hey, Strivias, welcome. In other words, me says Moet Knox. You're making the same. You're behaving the same way as my beginner student who said he was a beginner, but he was in fact intermediate or upper intermediate. Your grammar is well, above average, to say the least. Like, you have good control of the language. I'm not sure, of course, how you speak in English, but I mean verbally, but the way you write, well, that's quite already. You are in a minority, in an absolute minority, at least in Russia. So, like, please don't downplay your skills. It's vulgar already. So, Daisy Beans writes, wait till you find out what Peng, Leng, Butters, A1, Tin, and Rodman mean. What type of examinations? Oh, Peng, Leng, A1, Tin, and Rodman mean. Yeah, I'm not sure I do know those. What type of examinations do you do? We do 4 types of examinations for language here. Well, there is IELTS, there is TOEFL. I've never taken them, but the 4 sections they test are reading, listening, speaking, and writing. So there is no vocabulary or grammar. They kind of test practical skills. And it's not, I mean, we also have the state exam for schoolers, and we have, I would say, as many examinations and types of exams as there are institutions in Russia. So it's of course their in their competence, how they in their what. So they decide how to test people's knowledge, and every company decides how to test people's knowledge. Usually it's a worker, a manager, a headhunter, I mean a recruiter who has enough English to test the candidate's capacity. But I think the universal check is actually IELTS or TOEFL, IELTS being British, TOEFL being American. And there is obvious necessity for such two exams, and there are others. There is, of course, CPE, CAE, other exams usually taken by teachers, because you want to categorize people. You want to understand what a person is able to do from like the first minutes, and TOEFL and IELTS are no jokes. Of course, they're really challenging exams, and so if a person is already going to TOEFL, IELTS, well, maybe we can even say that the person is already ready to do some work in English, maybe not at the highest level if the score is lower than like 7 or 6.5, but again, it also depends on what you expect from people around you, how well they should speak, how many mistakes you can tolerate, and so on and so forth. So just people have different ways of speaking, and I think standards are generally lowering around the world because English is getting more and more global, and the point of every conversation is to deliver your idea, to convey your idea, and that's it. It's the same here. Those French and Spanish speaking exams still give me trauma. Well, we should talk about that. Daisy Beans, remember we wanted to have a stream about language learning with you. I think I would love to actually give this idea a go. I mean, to have it somewhere, well, let's say in April or May, depends on when you can. So kind of a, 2 hours interview in the same way, like just a call on Discord or Google Meet, or, well, Zoom maybe not, because I won't be able to pay for the subscription, and they have a limitation for 40 minutes calls. They have only 40 minutes calls for free accounts. Moetnok says, to be honest, this aforementioned submersion without revisiting the rule books and such definitely take its toll. Despite my apparent skills, I wouldn't be able to tell you what or why I'm doing from a grammar standpoint. You mean, Moetnox, I think you mean the Russian stream, right? Like where I said that if you just soak in the language from different sources without getting the framework, the grammar regulations, so that you are able to control what you say, like that's happening to you, you mean? Like that you got a lot of English intuitively or just by being exposed to that, but when you speak, you don't really know why you say it this way or another way. Daisy Bean says that she will message me. Okay, I have this habit of reading chat messages aloud. It stems from the times when I didn't have this application that showed messages on the screen. So maybe I should stop doing that and just read. But I mean, I saw some other streamers doing that, so it kind of makes me more comfortable, and I'm at least indicating to the viewers what I'm focusing on at the moment. I'm forgetting it all at this point. Well, what can I say about this? If it bothers you, I think you might seek some, I want to say counseling, but that might be like interpreted as psychological help. I meant you might find a teacher and just say, well, I'm kind of worried about my accuracy, language accuracy, so do I have some pitfalls that I should watch over? And well, I went to a teacher of English like 2 years ago just to track some inadequacies in my language, and I definitely will repeat that. Especially my pronunciation bothers me. I need to work on that. And some words I definitely pronounce incorrectly. But yeah, I mean, some of my students actually have classes because they say, well, I'm just maintaining my level, I'm just refreshing what I should know about the language. So yeah, uh, read them. It's good for those who just listen. I believe the stream should be understandable just from the audio. Oh, that's a good point. I do agree with you, Citrivias. It's actually, yeah, I think it's one of those reasons why I read out loud, because I know how many people, me included, listen to streams, not watch them. Because like, why should you watch a talking face? It's like super time consuming and basically meaningless and useless. So audio content, it is mostly audio content. So are we done with the language skill topic, the level? I mean, I think not until I have told the story about my African student Batatu. I had him in Cape Town in 2019 when I was a volunteer. We had 3 groups there: beginner, elementary, intermediate. Each group also had 2 subgroups, AB, AB. And he was in elementary B, which was slightly stronger than A, but still his classmates were not able to speak English well, so they were only able to produce separate sentences, kind of. At points it was a speech, but yeah, they were just learners and could only speak about some simple topics and made a lot of mistakes, and their speech was massively influenced by their language one, so mother tongue. But Tato was a different one. He was basically a stand-upper, so stand-up comedian. He was able to give a monologue for several minutes. He had a YouTube channel. He was a taxi driver in Cape Town, so he was very efficient with his English, and he was able to write an essay when I asked to do that. It was a 2-page story. And so essentially his level, I would rate him. So if I were to put him in a group, I would put him into an upper intermediate group. And I would ask him to also attend private sessions with me to eliminate the existing issues that he had with basic tenses. And so he had issues with present simple and past simple, and what I told you about, like messing up doing does, is and are, did, and like when you don't know where to put be and do, it's actually a very common problem. A lot of people stagger at this point. They say, as I mentioned, like I afraid of something, using afraid as a verb because they think it is a verb as it is in Russian, but it's not, and it's an adjective. They should say I am, and they say I am agree because of the same reason, and there are lots of such things. Or they just plainly don't understand how to use be or do in questions because it was a couple of decades ago at school when they studied that topic. So they say like, do you sad, or are you... A typical one I've heard, actually. A Google Meet call starts. So we say, we haven't said anything. They say, are you hear me? Or are you see me? Why it happens? Well, because they're kind of stressed, when the call just began. You are stressed, you don't know what's happening, whether there is connection, audio connection, visual connection. And you say, are you hear me? Or are you see me? And if you thought for a second, you would actually say, can you see, or at least do you see me? But because you are using your subconscious language background, you shoot with are you. And there are dozens, hundreds of such instances in a student's language. And so it's a massive problem, because to rectify such a thing, I can tell you statistics. I have such student, and we spent literally a year to get first results. He is C1, maybe. I mean, his language is impressive, really impressive. He is able to give monologues in English about very complex topics, but he might make some very simple mistakes, and it took us, sorry, a year to get to the first results, to the first fruit. With conditional one, with some phrases like it is worth, which was replaced with it worths, and so on and so forth. So you just take stuff from the subconscious segment to the conscious segment and establish control. It takes a ton of time. My success coach at school is an English teacher. I should ask her for lessons. Am I weird that I watch Tolkien faces? No, because, well, maybe I'm not intending to compliment myself, but maybe you like those faces, and so that brings you aesthetical pleasure, and so why should you stop? Like, we have ASMR, for example. ASMR is all about talking faces in different environments, and a lot of information gets to us visually, and like gestures, body language, colors, and so on and so forth. So why not? I mean, the most important thing is that you draw joy from that, and that's like, if you want to focus on that exactly, well, it's your right and your preference. Some I think streams I do watch, like full concentration, both audio and visual parts. I do be like that. Trivias, I'm not sure what that was. Are you referencing the simple mistakes that people make? Because if you say I do be like that, it's not a mistake, it's just Shakespearean English. It sounds extremely beautiful, but nobody talks like that. It's like who be you instead of who are you. And so who be you was, for example, in The Witcher. A guardsman asked that, so he was talking to the Witcher and his friends, and he was like, well, who be you? And that's yeah, just a joke. Not I, but it. It do. Sorry. Thank you, Matt Knox. I missed that. It do be like that. Aha, yes, now it makes more sense. Of course, it is a, yeah, now it's a plain one, yes. But again, serious, I think, yeah, I don't remember if I told you ever, but I had a chance to observe you at our English school, so at the school where I worked many years ago. And you could well teach there with your language, with your stellar language level. So, of course, that has to be a joke about you doing such stuff because, well, you were one person about whom I was wondering why would you even consider taking any English classes, because, well, as I said, you could be an educator yourself. And now that you stream, it just proves the point. So for you, English is just a part of you, not some kind of a tool you have to master painfully. My pencil, sorry. We shall have a stream with just speaking Shakespearean. We shall have, I think it was, we should have a stream with just speaking Shakespearean. You can just play Dota and pick Anti-Mage. That will be Shakespearean. So yeah, I can't stop babbling about Dota. Now I know that nobody really cares. You mean nobody cares about the language level? Well, another point to stop obsessing about language levels, right? There's another example now. other than anti-mage. Okay, which one? Which example? I'm now lost in thought a bit about Fishy from Genshin. I'm not competent about that. About people not caring about languages. So about the language skills, the levels. Why then people are so obsessed? At least in Russia, like, oh, I have such a terrible level, and see, why it bothers me is because I care. I mean, I honestly like when people speak English well, when they care about how they say things, how they structure sentences. And that stretches to Russian. I just like when people speak or write well. It gives me pleasure and takes it away when they don't. When I was a teenager, I sent back my friends' SMS messages with corrected mistakes. I mean, I got a message from my friend, corrected mistakes there, grammar, spelling, sent it back in the corrected version. I'm now a better man. I'm much more gentle. I'm much less obtrusive. And I don't know, like aggressive, linguistically aggressive. I don't do that anymore unless I'm asked. I mean, it's my job to correct mistakes if I'm asked again. But the point is that I do like good language skill. And if I were an employer, I would look at how a person speaks and writes and so on and so forth. Because it matters to me, because well, it's not only about the melody of the language, which definitely exists, because a language is exactly a melody. It's more complex than just a system. It's music, because it has some deviations, some kind of exceptions. But it's also the efficiency of communication. So if people send me messages and they make spelling mistakes, I misunderstand them, and then I need to waste my time clarifying things. Like, what did you want to say? I need to handle my frustration. I need to handle my I need to apply extra energy to understanding them. So it either means that that I am a terrible person with inflated expectations, or that I'm just trying to be practical about communication and respectful and expect the same from others. So that's what I have to say here. I think it's often the... No, that's one impressive... Whoa, 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 whoa. Look up her speech patterns someday, I think. That's... I'm not sure whether Moetnox was trolling previous about the unfinished message or it was about Genshin. I think it's often the same. You're afraid that people will laugh at you, but the vast majority won't, and those who will don't matter, with some German edit as a bonus. Luckily, so it was about the character from Genshin. Luckily, I'm valued for writing code, and for everything else there is Grammarly. Well, again, I don't think you have to worry about your English. The number of mistakes you're able to make is infinitesimally small in comparison to many others. So trying to learn 3 languages at once, so I need all the skills I can get, as Daisy Beans. Well, that's a powerful task to have, and actually it's a good way when you mix studying one language with another, because it actually boosts the speed. And I mean, not always, because if, for example, those languages are Arabic and Chinese and Spanish, well, they're not too much connected. They're from different language families. Well, Spanish and Arabic overlap, I think 10%, I was told, but essentially, of course, they're very different and probably won't be, studying one won't facilitate the other. But if it is like German, Spanish, and English, well, then similarities are obvious and will be appearing here and there. Yes, that is I, the one who makes all the spelling mistakes, no grammar or sense. No, I mean, again, look at this. I mean, a person who lives in the UK and speaks wonderful English says, like, I'm the one who makes all the spelling mistakes. Not true. You have occasional blunders which happen because of I think fast typing and autocorrection. So like show instead of should. I mean, I mean, if you only could imagine what kind of mistakes people have, and just relax and stop kicking yourself. It's not good for your mental health, first of all. Secondly, you deserve praise for speaking English at such a level. Where I'm from, people will make fun of you for make one mistake, so spent years no speaking my native tongue out of fear of being judged. Well, in Russia, it could be also similar. I mean, and I think around the world, actually, it can be more or less the same. We have, I think, such TV programs in every country, probably. Like people are asked in the street, like, how to pronounce this word, or what's the name of the capital of this country, or what's the formula. And when they don't answer, they are laughed at, and it's presented as ultimate humor. I mean, it's of course bullshit. It is not funny, because a person is not supposed to learn everything and keep it in mind forever. But you know what I thought now? I do think that striving for no mistakes is a preferred way for me. I mean, I might not like mistakes, but I will not say anything. And especially, definitely, I won't make fun of a person. Under one condition, if a person is trying to become better. So for me, and that's not only about language, not about English. It's just, I think, my philosophy, my life paradigm. So it's not about whether you make mistakes about anything. It's about whether you want to correct them, whether you want to become better. So because if you do, you are like, how do I say that? So you are limitlessly better than anyone else who has accumulated certain knowledge and stopped and brags about it. So, and this knowledge could be like, well, substantial, like a lot of knowledge, but at some point the person will overtake you anyway if you stand on one place and this person is moving. So yeah, I think that would be my answer. Mistakes themselves are not a reason to laugh at a person or make fun of him or her, or insult or whatever. But if this person strives to improve, that's the thing. And so as a teacher, I welcome development, of course, and I didn't mention that in the previous question about my coaching attitude. So I respect a person's life and family and job, and I won't push um, if I see that a person is doing everything he or she can in life and has very little time for English but still wants to grow. So I will adjust the program, especially if I like this person, I will adjust the program in a way that we can realistically move forward. But if I see slacking, if I see indulgence, if I see that the person is just not trying hard enough while he or she can, and keeps making the same mistakes over and over after a year of talking about how so after a year of first starting to talk about those mistakes, well, I start to have questions and healthy criticism, and I think I have the right to, at least as his or her teacher. As a person, well, not my business. I have other things to attend to than to criticize and mock people. I don't like it. But as a teacher, I start asking questions because, well, I expect a healthy development. So I think here we can move to the next question. The next question is, well, where do I have them? Where? I have them on YouTube. Let me scroll. Why there are so many fears about languages while other spheres of life aren't affected that much? For example, sport, cooking style, and why some people don't have this fear. So that was asked by my colleague. And here I think it's a biased question. It's a question from a person who maybe is afraid of language, or well, I think no. I think it's a question from a person who has seen a lot of other people who were afraid of the language. And definitely it's not true that people are more afraid of the languages than of anything else, like it was in the question. Style and sport and cooking skills and everything else. So I, for one, am very afraid of sport, and I told during my Russian stream that I feel, well, infernally awkward in the gym, or I went to tennis sessions last year. I felt so alien, so out of place, such an outsider. Like, I expect people to say like, hey, loser, what the hell are you doing here? You don't look like us. You're not as agile. You're not as dexterous. You're not as skillful. So please leave the institution. Leave it for people who can do sport, because you can't. And I've not been sporty throughout all my life. And yeah, I did some sport here and there, but still I feel quite feeble in comparison to some, beefy guys who can pull weights and who are agile and athletic. And I'm not even beginning to talk about the school changing room, where like the boys are very toxic with each other about many things. And my experience wasn't too bad, but it was enough to start to hate sport, especially when you are like, when you see all this like shouting at each other and this like freaking competitiveness, like our team will win yours. Like 5 minutes ago we were one group. What happened? I went to a hockey match recently, and again, if we are at the hockey match, then suddenly two cities are enemies. If we are outside of the hockey match, suddenly these two teams are like from the same country and not enemies. What kind of bullshit is that? So I don't understand sport, but that's kind of a philosophical thing. But I also don't feel comfortable with just playing sport, with playing activities, and I expect to be banished from a gym, from a tennis court at any time. The same with fancy boutiques. You walk in, you see beautiful clothes, beautiful people, and you think, oh, I don't belong here. I don't belong even in this shopping center. I don't belong in the restaurant, in a fancy restaurant. Like they will say, oh, who are you, boy? Maybe you should leave. And there are many such fears in my life, a lot of them, and English is not one of them. So I think that's my situation, and for other people it's different, a different combination of fears, of insecurities. Daisy Bean says, it feels like a lot of teachers here have the same issue. Some kids really end up giving them a really hard time because people are very judgmental. So I think these were about two different things about teachers. It was about developmental stuff and expectations, and judgmental. Feel the same about sports. Went to the gym once and never turned back. Well, it's sport is a whole separate issue itself. My point is that fears are many, different, personal, and it's not about language. So the question, I think, is just not right. Like, people are not only afraid about languages, they're afraid of everything. Why? Because fear is very natural, and it's an evolutionary mechanism that helps you to save yourself from danger. And well, also, for example, if I'm afraid of sport, well, maybe I should be afraid. I mean, I know it's hard. I know it's a difficult task. So my natural response is fear, because I'm afraid I'm not evolutionary competitive. I think I'm not attractive enough for the opposite sex. I think I'm not able to survive long enough. Subconsciously, I'm afraid of that, because like my body will fade, will decay faster. And so I am afraid because I should be, because a human must be smart and beautiful and healthy, right? Like both physiology and mentally, physiologically and mentally, on paper, in an ideal, perfect world. And I agree, but we can do as much in life, right? And we don't have infinite resources to do that. With English, with languages, well, why could I be afraid of somebody else? Well, because I might not get a good job. People might laugh at me. I understand I'm slacking, I'm kind of procrastinating. I'm afraid that I don't have enough control over myself even. I'm not able to study. Should I be afraid? Well, yes. Because if you're not able to control yourself, that means that you will live not your own life, and you will actually be a slave of your subconsciousness, a slave of your procrastination. Well, that's a very bad scenario, and you should be afraid of that. So in this case, fear is a very normal feeling, and the question should be, well, what should I do about that? The second part of the question, well, let me first see the message. Changing rooms brings back memories of when I punched open a locker to shut some people up. Chase someone with a tennis racket. Whoa. Daisy Beans, you definitely had quite a teenagerhood and childhood. I looking forward to discussing your school times. That's something very impressive. Did you shut up those people? I guess yes. So I would love to again quote Riddick from the movie that's called The Same. So Vin Diesel, in his my favorite role as Riddick, and he said in that movie, "You're afraid of the wrong things. You're afraid of me, but you should be afraid of something lurking in the dark outside." And in many psychological lectures, at least in one, I can relate to by Professor Jordan Peterson about the question whether you should quit your job. No, I think I'm mixing up things here. So it wasn't about that lecture, but just something I deductively concluded from many lectures. So you should just be afraid of the right thing. You shouldn't be afraid of traveling, you should be afraid of not traveling, because traveling opens you up, makes you more tolerant, makes you more educated, experienced. You should not be afraid of speaking up. You should be afraid of injustice. Like if you haven't spoken up and let, for example, your colleague be abused by the employer, or if you... So I think you get my drift. So sometimes we are afraid of the wrong things. Yeah, about the job. So if you are afraid of, yeah, that actually was present there. So if you don't leave your job that you hate because you're afraid of instability, of what if I don't find one soon, it means that maybe you're afraid of the wrong thing, because in several years, in 5 years, in 10 years, you'll be older. You will be less competitive on the labor market, and you maybe should be afraid of that you won't find as many opportunities as now. So maybe you need to rethink your fears and your dreads. And a lot of my colleagues have this fear about leaving the school where they work, private school, for quite low salaries, and they're afraid of becoming self-employed. And actually, many people I've seen recently, because I only began thinking about that recently, so who are slaves of their own fears. I was a slave of my own fears, and I'm very, very happy that I still dived into some adventures, went through a lot of hard times, but got liberated from those reservations and anxiety. And I got new ones, of course, but they are at a different level, and they are just new challenges. I'm not a slave anymore, or at least not that badly. So you should and can be afraid, but it's better to be afraid of the right things. That will be the conclusion for this question. It's better to quote Dune, I think, Litany Against Fear. Oh, I don't know it. Maybe you can drop a link, Matt Knox, or somehow share with us. They didn't mess with me, says Daisy Beans. Well, you taught them a lesson, definitely. Sounds like there was some bullying in your school. Yeah, we only have one more question left, I think. Oh no, two. One is why we ignore our native tongue and at the same time are obsessed with speaking English flawlessly, like Shakespeare. So I think it's, again, not actually the case. I generally see that people who ignore their native tongue, like speak, say, not very correct Russian, they tend to ignore English as well. And that's because it's kind of impossible to learn English well without knowing Russian well, for instance. Like understanding grammar and mechanics of your native language helps a lot. And if you cannot articulate yourself well in your native tongue, you cannot, you have no basis to use for expressing yourself in English and other languages. Oh, here is Daisy Beans on Twitch now. A litany against fear. I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death that brings total obliteration. I will face my fear. I will permit it to pass over me and through me. And when it has gone past, I will turn the inner eye to see its path. Where the fear has gone, there will be nothing. Only I will remain. Thank you for sharing that. So in one video that I quite like, It's a short one. It's in Russian. It says, danger is a real thing, but fear is a choice. So you choose to be afraid. I don't know. I think realistically speaking, you cannot not be afraid. Like you can't help it, but you can choose to prefer other priorities, kind of think about other aspects of the situation, about the importance of it, or responsibility, or people who depend on you, and so on and so forth. Like I remember I used this in past about public speaking. I tried to think, well, yeah, I'm afraid, but let's imagine I'm here to fulfill the function of mine. So people don't care about the fact that it's Andy speaking. They actually want to get information and content. So I should and must focus on the content aspect, not on my emotions, because they don't matter and they will only hamper the success of the task. And so actually that helped. I used to think of myself as a gear in the mechanism. With time, it was just becoming pleasant to speak publicly, and so the question about fear just vanished. And well, yeah, I think you can reach the level where you get rid of fear. That's therapy session. Well, of course, I told you it will be there will be a lot of psychology connected to education. So yeah, I was afraid of public speaking, but generally I no longer am. But when stakes are rising, I get afraid again. So, for example, I was afraid today, and I'm still afraid, despite having immense pleasure from talking to you. I'm still afraid about things. For example, that this video is not as great as I want it to be, or that my intention of delivering everything in an ordered, well-organized manner failed, and I've been like I rewatched the video that I gave in Russian, that I made in Russian, and I mean I had known it would be messy. I had known it would be chaotic because it was my birthday. It was like a lot of wishes coming, and there were a lot of people there who I needed to respond to, and I was also restreamed. There was a lot of stress, and that was the first episode and too much stuff to talk about. Still, I was afraid because I put a lot of hopes onto streaming. It's basically my new life's target to develop my channel, to be at least a relatively successful channel. So if it fails, now or later, I mean, it can fail probably somewhere in the distance. So if it fails, if I realize that I'm going nowhere, I will be, well, I don't know what I'll do. I mean, it's gonna be shattering. So, and because the target is so high, I have no choice. But I mean, I can choose to not be afraid again. Like I know it's dangerous, but I'm trying to focus on quality. I'm trying to focus on thinking how to give the best quality, on what to do, what people might find interesting, what I find interesting, because I can talk about it with more passion or play a game with more passion. Like just being afraid makes little sense. But like when I had my English club, which was perfectly understandable for me, I wasn't afraid of doing anything there because it was a completed project for me. I knew almost everything about it, and I thought it was successful already. It was the most successful club in the city with lots of people, and I knew it was a success, and I was peaceful. I just enjoyed it. So I had no reason to be afraid. Here it's different. So it's it's interesting. Like the stakes have risen, and so fears reappeared. Something like that. Hmm. Um, what was that about? Yeah, about the discrepancy between languages, approaches to languages. So I think, again, it depends on how you treat your own language. If you treat it respectfully, you probably will have the same attitude towards a foreign language, and vice versa. And I've seen that with many of my students. I told that also during the first stream that I would like to actually ask people, maybe if you, in the future in my career, to write for me something in Russian. Well, actually, it's extreme. What I do now is I ask them, do you have a recording of your speech? Do you have maybe your blog where I can read your thoughts in Russian? Because I'm very curious about how they express themselves in their native language. It tells me a lot about their language tradition, about their articulation of their thoughts, about their patterns, and then I can understand better why and how they do things in English. And so they're always linked. And normally I see a massive connection. So what a person does in Russian usually manifests somehow in English or gets new forms or something is explained. So I should again kind of not disagree, but maybe reformulate the question or say that, well, there is actually no. It's connected to fears, of course. Like if you think you can speak Russian well, you probably. Wait, let me formulate that. So. If a person doesn't really think about how they speak in Russian, but this person is afraid of speaking in English, or is obsessed with the quality, some unrealistic desires, like I want to speak like him. Actually, yes, I think I failed to talk about that. And yeah, that's something that was absent during the previous recording. So yeah, that happens. So, for example, I still have students who say, I want to speak like them. By them, there could be some podcaster, or they say, well, a lot of people speak in beautiful business English. I want to do the same. And it's a psychological thing, I guess. We need to. What I usually do is I try to dissect what they mean by I want to speak like them. Is it certain vocabulary items? Is it certain way of expressing themselves? Or, and very often so, it's an exterior motive. I mean, it is not something they actually want. Very often they just, for example, have heard that in the English world or in Western etiquette, people are very polite and soft and gentle with each other in speech, and they say, well, I want to talk like them. But I then ask, well, do you want to actually, do you want to be sugarcoating everything? They say, well, no, actually, I'm quite negative about such tendencies. And then we have this long conversation. What is politeness? What is the essence of it? Why the Western world sees it this way and why we do it differently? So it's actually a very I need to unfold this topic next time, probably, about yeah, mimicking or not mimicking certain speech patterns. Uh, yep. Also, mm, sometimes it's connected with unrealistic aspirations, unrealistic ambitions, being over ambitious. They want to talk as beautifully as some writer. Like, imagine a student who says, I want to be like George Martin or John Tolkien, like speak like them. Well, I mean, you probably cannot. That that's why they're George Martin and John Tolkien. They are unique, and they have been traveling for decades to reach what they have in terms of linguistic capacity. Uh, you you probably shouldn't even want to repeat that. And the question is, what is you? Like, maybe we should focus on unfolding what you have inside your speech. Uh, what are your strong sides? What in what way what in what way you can charm people, because every person has speech patterns. And yeah, I've noticed that with myself. For example, there was this game Days Gone, and Deacon, what was his name? So the protagonist, the main character, had such a cool style. I wanted to mimic him badly. Um, very cool expressions, mannerisms, and some colloquial English and some slang. Or the main character of The Sinking City, Charles Reed, like phrases like color me interested instead of count me interested or count me in, or you can consider me interested. He said color me interested. So, I mean, people are greedy, and I'm saying that in most neutral way possible. Like, we all, of course, we want to be everything and everyone and do the best things the best people can, but that's just impossible. What you can hope to do is to improve what you have and maybe mimic and copy what other people can do in some portion. So the right question is, so what specifically do you want to do as well? Show me what kind of words, speech patterns impress you, and let's aim at acquiring those, but not everything. You cannot be like George Carlin or like Martin Luther King. You can't be some stand-up comedian. No, you can be yourself, and you can learn to borrow more effectively. Yes. So I think this I will talk about in Russian too this week on Saturday, or when I have my second episode, because I missed that totally. I have to go. Have these 3 days are going to be crazy. Color me impressed is something I hear a lot. Might catch my white might watch. Sorry, the word later. Please don't delete it. See ya. I won't delete it. Thank you very much, Trivias, and see you either on my stream or your stream. I hope you don't go mad during those 3 days that you have mentioned. To be honest, I have never heard count me interested. It was always color, as far as I remember, as well as color me impressed. Well, yeah, count me interested doesn't exist, I think. It's just what I invented on the go. Count me in, I meant. And I think I said it, so count me in or consider me interested. But color me interested, I've never seen apart from that game. So, I mean, you see how different we have very different experiences. Probably you have seen more series or movies which I haven't, and that's why we have different exposure to that phrase. And yeah, certain phrases, words impress me a lot, and when I mention them to people are just, well, I don't know what you found here, and it's very personal. So we have to be specific. I need to talk about that, definitely. It's good that we excavated this aspect of the question eventually. And the final question is, can you teach English without a student's book? Also a great question. So, in a nutshell, of course, just that students' books are too great to ignore them. They offer a nice basis. They consolidate the most important stuff inside in terms of grammar, vocabulary, and speaking exercises, listening exercises, reading and writing stuff. So I used to teach only by students' books. I mean they were a massive chunk of my materials, but over time that has been changing. Now I only use them to present some grammar topic, and I have a couple of students who follow a student's book, a few students, and I'm very thankful for that, because I know it's hard to be as disciplined as to follow a book on your own will, which they do. So they actually independently from me go with the book and only report to me what they have done, what issues they've had, and we discuss the most complex rules. For example, I check certain items there because I know where the pitfalls are. I'm talking about English File series by Oxford. So it's just, yeah, it's profound knowledge with multitudes of exciting topics inside, and Oxford, Cambridge, Pearson, Merriam-Webster, and Express Publishing and other publishing houses, and universities have created so many wonderful programs with great content to explore. And everything is so logically connected. Usually, like English File has this at an impeccable level, I think, with every unit being so like you meet something new in unit 1, in unit 2 it's reinforced, or you meet something in unit 2 and then you study something in unit 2 and then it's kind of repeated in unit 3, and then you have a workbook where you can like do everything you learned in the student's book. So it's kind of a homework book, but I just say to my students to use it when they want to repeat the rule again. And we have this teacher's book with extra exercises and explanations and answers, and there are all the scripts for all the audios, and it's amazing. And you can hardly find anything that is as consolidated and well presented. You're learning with Pearson. Well, yeah, I'm not sure if I ever covered a student's book from them, but I definitely have seen those. I think Cutting Edge was from Pearson or Headway. So it's not that important actually. So just one of the biggest publishing houses, I think. And in my opinion, if we send a group of people to an deserted island, only 5 students and a teacher, they will come back with a student's book. I mean, they will codify all the knowledge they will have accumulated there. And yeah, so it's just a natural tendency to make something like a student's book. I think if I take all my self-made materials, I can kind of make a student's book already, and I dream actually about that. I want to have a student's book based on video games. So if I become a big channel and have funds or resources, I can start a Kickstarter project and maybe collect some funds and hire designers and actually produce such a book, and not for even financial purposes, not to earn money, but because I think it's a cool endeavor itself. So yeah, that was question number 6. We have been live for 2 hours and 10 minutes, and that's exactly how much time I had planned to spend talking about these questions. So, and that's the first stream about education in English. I don't have any more material prepared, but maybe you have some questions again. Those who have been silent, who have been silently watching, maybe you have something to say. I'm very thankful, of course, to Daisy Beans, to Matt Knox, and Strivias for offering their opinions and participating actively. That's been so... that was just very important to me, to have that addition, to have your support throughout many streams already. In fact, the stream about education was educational, yeah. And inspirational, life opening. Oh, show-stopping. I haven't seen this adjective before. Very interesting. Let me find the show-stopping. Wow, you give me a word that the best existing dictionary out there doesn't know about. Wow, it's just, but it's Googleable. I can use it. I can find it on the internet. Extremely good. Something that's very impressive. But what? How did it come to exist? Show stopping. Oh, I'm gonna try with the hyphen then. With the hyphen it exists. So, I see. Like a show is stopped. Like, kinda. I see. I found a good translation. Show stopping. Cool one. Thank you, Daisy Beans. Very, very useful adjective. A very fresh one. I love fresh adjectives. So, I have a question to you both. I mean, and to the others maybe, but mostly to you both, because Muetnox, you have been to both streams in Russian and English, and Daisy Beans, you have seen, I think, almost the whole stream in English today. What do you think of the format? Should it be shorter maybe? Should I approach answering questions differently? And I mean, I'm planning to make this systematic. So my thoughts now are to have the Russian stream on Saturday or just at the weekend, and have the English one as a follow-up on Wednesday, and continue like that, like endlessly, infinitely. In between, of course, gaming streams, but these 2 days will be for such talking stuff. And maybe you have some thoughts on the way I'm presenting my ideas. I'm not sure whether I'm gonna stream the themes today. It's almost 1 a.m. I like it. Educational with a good personal touch. Felt like a comfortable conversation. Well, it's a pleasure, of course. I mean, I don't want to sound perfunctory. I do mean it. It's very heartwarming to hear that you found value in that. Seems fine as it is to me. Kind of look like a TED talk with some Q&A. Whoa, that's a high level compliment. I don't deserve TED talk. Yeah, I mean, I'm far away from that. But thank you again. I do appreciate. So about The Sims today, although I do want to stream The Sims, I'm missing my house. I'm missing my project. It's just that tomorrow I'll have a lesson that will start relatively early for me, because it's gonna be at 2 o'clock p.m. But as I said, it's already 1 a.m. here, and I need to do some routines and wake up in the morning properly. I kind of hate coming to lessons with this kind of half swollen face because of the antidepressant. I have some. I need more time to get ready for the classes, and I need to wake up earlier. Even though I'm not a language student, it feels like everyone can learn from this. Well, hopefully so. Hopefully so, and that was the intention, to make it kind of globally reachable, globally approachable. And you remember that my intentions are to switch to psychology in the future. So it's not going to happen this year, maybe next year, maybe 2 years later. And I'm hoping for some transition in some way, like from education to psychology, smoothly growing together with you, taking questions, having talks. So the big start has been given. I'll be trying hard to keep up, to keep making these videos, and trying to make them as useful as possible. Again, I'm very anxious about the whole thing, because if it fails, I'll be very heartbroken, but it's an understatement. So I have no other way but forward. I have to make it successful. That's my commitment. Happened to miss the stream right after the last Russian one, where you probably talked about it. About the Sims, or there were two, I think, two Sims streams on Saturday, right after the stream in Russian, and there was another long one, I think, on Monday, 2 days ago, 5 hours of building. So, oh, you mean maybe the psychology? The psychology I just mentioned from time to time. I do want to shift to this industry. I want to go and study and become a psychologist maybe later in my career. So I don't want to, what do we call it? To make the ending awkwardly long and lengthy. Let's stop here. I think probably see you tomorrow. Probably I'm gonna have some intense days, but if I don't slack, if I kind of am diligent enough, I think I should be able to go live tomorrow with The Sims. So stay tuned. Discuss it as it was fresh, since it was. Thank you. So thank you again. I cannot express how much I appreciate you coming today. Looking forward to to meeting you soon. Yeah. Bye bye, Moet Knox. Bye bye, Daisy Beans, and bye bye, everyone who has been here or will be watching the recording. Thanks to you too. Cheers.